Have the Steelers figured things out? Well, that'll be a question many will ask and wonder about this coming week. But either way, whether they have or whether they haven't, they have finally picked up a victory. So the Steelers stop the bleeding and pick up a win over the Denver Broncos, beating Denver here at home at the friendly confines, now friendly again at Heinz Field, 27-19. Steelers' first victory also here at home at Heinz Field. This is our Steelers postgame show here on Pittsburgh Sports Live and Steelers Now. I'm your host, as always, Mike Asti, from my undisclosed location here in the Steelers Media Center here at Heinz Field, and I am joined by two members of our crew at Steelers Now, Jarrett Bailey and Nick Farabaugh. So, guys, the Steelers pick up this victory. They once again started out hot with a big play opened up this game. Ben to Deontay, just like the week earlier against Green Bay, but against the Packers, the offense then puttered away the rest of that game, not able to continue things. In this game, the offense able to continue moving the ball, able to get a couple other big plays sprinkled in. Chase Claypool got involved, and Najee Harris got his first career 100-yard rushing day, despite leaving the game early. Nick, what's your feeling now about this Steelers team? Do you feel better about this team? Do you feel like the offense did kind of figure things out, that individually they looked a little better as well? Or maybe are you still kind of at the same level of concern because Denver's 3 victories this year are against likely non-playoff teams and they now have lost back-to-back games?
Well, I first of all, I don't think this is a magically fixed offense.
Right.
I think there's still very serious problems on the offense, and they're going to be there all year. It's kind of just the thing. But I also think that this is kind of the formula for the offense. You know, Ben looked sharp today. He looked a lot more comfortable. He looked like he kind of knew what to do in the offense. And, you know, he was on rhythm. He was on time. When there was a window that was open for him, he took the shot. He never did that in the first 4 weeks. That was kind of the thing with Ben. He left a lot of things on the field, or he just made a lot of bad decisions and killed the Steelers. And while he did almost have 2 near picks today, obviously, the Broncos did drop 2 picks today. I just thought he was much sharper, a willingness to target the middle of the field, something that we really haven't seen. There was much more willingness today from him. He was more accurate than he was before. He was kind of the big thing. And then he also had, well, they have a running game now, and this is now 2 straight weeks that they have built upon that. The big thing going into Green Bay was, well, you needed to run the football. They ran it decently well. They didn't run it great, but it was decent. And
Right.
Then they come out this week, and they really run it well against a good defense that is one of the better run defenses in the NFL statistically so far this year. That's not a bad defensive line. They neutralized Von Miller. I mean, they did a lot of good things on the offensive line. So when you play like that up front, you take pressure off of Ben. Ben didn't throw it a ton today, and he didn't need to. So when you take the pressure off Ben, and Ben can just sit back there, kind of be a game manager, and Najee and the O-line can go to work like that,
defensive line.
It's kind of what you need, right? I mean, that's kind of the exact thing you want to see. So is it fixed? No, but there's promising signs here, and the offensive line is the most promising sign because we're seeing improvement.
The offensive line did play better in this game, and that's a week after arguably their worst performance of the year against the Green Bay Packers. Yes, Najee Harris was able to get 60-plus yards against Green Bay, also used as a receiver, less used as a receiver in this game, but 122 yards, I believe he finished with an average of 5.3, which is the bigger deal for Najee as long as he's healthy. That's a big deal for the offense. And Ben Roethlisberger, as you mentioned, 15 for 25, 253, 2 TDs, a quarterback rating of over 120, and 60% completion percentage. Very similar to Buffalo, very similar to the 11-0 start last year. You're not going to see 350, 400 on 40 pass attempts in the victories, but we have been seeing those in the losses. So it does feel like that's a more successful Ben, and the offense was able to kind of control the game more so. Nick Farabaugh, Jarrett Bailey here of Steelers Now. Steelers do win it 27-19. Now, Jarrett, going to Ben, because Ben was the conversation so much last week. I'll admit I was among those who maybe thought it was the end of the line for Ben Roethlisberger. He turned around and certainly played able to lead this team to victory, even though it wasn't necessarily an MVP performance, but good enough to say the least. What did you notice different about Ben in this game? Was it just maybe he had better support from the O-line, et cetera? Maybe play calling improved, or was there anything at all from Ben himself that was a better version of Ben Roethlisberger? Because as Nick said, he just simply did play better than he's been playing in about a month.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna echo a lot of what Nick said. In terms of looking comfortable, that's the most comfortable Ben's looked all year. Um, and it helps a lot when the running game is going and they don't have to ask Ben to throw it 40 times. And I
Right.
think that is kind of the formula that this team wanted to have coming into the year where they could, okay, let's run the ball, run the ball, run the ball, not depend on Ben to have to throw it 50 times because that's going to be when Ben has to throw it a lot of times per game, it becomes a predictable offense and it just slows things down. So, no, I mean, he looked comfortable. They started off mirror image of what it was last week. It was just a matter of, okay, can they keep it going? They did. He made smart decisions. Chase Claypool had a big day. And they've looked good even after Juju goes down. So it's good to be able to have those guys step up when they need to. Ben didn't throw an interception. A couple very well could have been intercepted. He got away with a couple, but I mean, overall, he just looked more comfortable. He looked better. So now, by no means do I think that this is gonna, be the norm for Pittsburgh. I don't think they're going to play as well as they did today throughout the year, but at the same time, they're not. I don't think they're going to look as bad as they have in the past few weeks as well. So it was a promising game for Ben and the offense as a whole.
Yeah, and it really was a must-win game for the Steelers and a requirement for Ben to play well, but all of that did happen. Ben was able to be motivated by whatever he's heard this past week. He did play better. He played successful football for the Steelers. The offensive line stepped up a little bit as well, and of course, this team was able to pick up a much-needed victory, 27-19 over the Denver Broncos. Now, Nick, we can talk all day about Ben playing better because that's incredibly important. And again, many were thinking they should go to Mason Rudolph entering this game. Others were thinking, okay, if that's not the case, when do you start thinking about that? And Mike Tomlin even talked about this past week that Ben had a hip injury. Maybe that could have been affecting his play to this point. Ben played better, so obviously that's not a conversation this coming week. But Najee Harris, the rookie, 60-plus yards last week. He had 14 receptions one of the weeks. He was really trying to be involved as a receiver. They were trying to do something with him the first couple weeks, even when they beat Buffalo, not able to really get going. The offensive line has been sluggish. He was able to emerge in this game. What really allowed him to emerge? Was it just the offensive line able to block more, or was there anything you saw in his game that improved? Because to really paint the picture of what Najee Harris did in this game with 5.3 yards per carry, this is the first time all year the Denver Broncos defense has allowed anyone to get over 100 yards on the ground. And it is rookie Najee Harris, the very first time he does it in the NFL of his career.
Well, there's a few things. One, yes, the blocking was just better. Not just from his line. I thought the tight ends looked better. I thought the receivers were out there blocking a little bit better. Like, you get help from every level when you're a running back.
Right.
You get help every level. And he got help from everyone today. And it was a team effort. But for Najee, in something that was not talked about a lot, he was legitimately missing holes in the first 4 games. I mean, really the first 3 is when he was missing a lot, but you saw on tape in these games, he was missing holes. I mean, there were holes to be capitalized on in the first 3 games. Now I think he's starting to feel better. First of all, he's starting to feel the offensive line out better. I think he's starting to process NFL speed much better. And then 3, I just think he knows now, okay, this is what I can and can't do in the NFL, right? Like, this is, I can cut here. This is how close I can get to press the line. It's like these small details.
He's a rookie. Yeah, it's different than being at Alabama, for sure.
Exactly. It's very different. Even at Alabama, he couldn't have been at a better place to stimulate.
Right.
It is so much different to go up to the NFL, right? And that's the thing. And I think Najee is finally now kind of feeling it out, kind of seeing, hey, this is what I can do. This is what I can't do. And now he's also kind of working off the offensive line. You know, they've kind of had a static offensive line now for a few weeks, although Haig was in there last week. But now they kind of he knows how to work off his guys. And I think that's been the big thing as well. I just think he knows what to do at this point. And I think Najee, it's just an experience thing. And I think that's also the story with the offensive line.
Well, does the offensive line's performance in this game, and it's not exactly Pro Bowl level by any means, but certainly much better, arguably their best performance of the season, and couple that with Najee Harris on the ground, what you saw from the tight ends, et cetera, and even Ben Roethlisberger, Does it give you confidence that this offensive line will progress throughout this season and get to where they need to be? Because they did need to get to a certain level for this offense, whether it be Matt Canada's play calling, Ben as a quarterback, Najee, etc., to have a chance this year. And many had wondered entering this week if it was just simply not able to happen this year due to the youth and inexperience and the injuries. Zach Banner's still a banged up player, but they played well. They answered the critics in this game. Does it maybe lead you to believe that, okay, week 7, 8, they could get there this year on the normal track if everyone else also keeps their current pace?
Listen, I think it's very possible because it's a young line, as we've said before. You know, not only is it Green and Moore that you're playing with, you also have to consider Kevin Dotson coming into the year had, 3-4 starts? I mean, yeah, he looked great in those, but he's also being flanked by 2 rookies. So you essentially have 3 guys there that haven't played all that much in the NFL,
right?
And they have to gel together. And now I think you're kind of seeing that. You know, Green's had in my opinion, his 2 best games in the NFL these past 2 weeks. So he's improving. Dan Moore had a bit of a rough week last week. He was better this week. Dotson, honestly, Kevin Dotson's put together some nice tape over the past few weeks. And then you get Trey Turner, who is now the vet. He's kind of settling into his role. And, you know, Chuks Okorafor, he is what he is, right?
Had some penalties in this game that were a bit kind of rough. It was death taxes and false start penalties and Okorafor.
But he and Turner did a nice job of, you know, handling Von Miller. They were sending some chips his way. They were giving him help, and you know, for what he did, man, he did well. I'm very interested to see how they look with Zach Banner back in here. If they're running for what they are now, I mean, Banner, you could argue coming into the year, if you picked anyone out on the line, Banner was the best run blocker on the team. So
you would think. I mean, it's an unknown. It's hard to support it, I guess.
Listen, he was the tackle
for a
eligible.
year.
He was a tackle eligible for a year, and when he did really well in that role as a run blocker. So you would think that would be his strength. But yeah, it's kind of interesting to see if he's going to be a downgrade, if he's going to be an upgrade, and more importantly, what they do, because that tackle situation now is really interesting because Moore's improved. He's a 4th-round rookie, and he's improving. But Chuks Okorafor is a guy that maybe has now put together a fine game, but he's also been bad at times. So now you have to work with that. But the offensive line, they look like they're improving. So, yeah, I mean, they could be – I don't know if week 7 or 8 is kind of your goal. I'm thinking more like week 12, 13.
To be more reasonable, I was just throwing out random weeks out there. But, yeah, probably more reasonably so later on in the season. I'm really happy I put us in boxes, though, because I enjoyed Jarrett's reaction to that. The death taxes and score for false start penalties. We had a few of those. Like, I got a full body laugh out of Allen up there in the press box when I said that line as well. Yeah, and of course, the offensive line was going to need time this year. Zach Banner's actually been out so long that he's oddly put himself in a situation where the offensive line is now improving, no longer the scapegoat, and allowing other things to improve, that if they actually go backwards when he returns, he's going to get blamed for things, whether it's his fault or not. So he certainly needs to get back there as soon as possible. But the offensive line blocking and being at their best, even if their best isn't great, certainly an improvement. And granted, there was really nowhere else to go but up. But the offensive line playing better allowed Ben to be better, allowed the offense to call the plays they want, control the game a little bit more, and also, of course, allowed Najee Harris to dominate on the ground, which I don't think is any small deal at all, and certainly made it easier on Ben and the overall offense to get those big plays off. Now, Jarrett, I do want to kind of flip the script a little bit here because the offense is going to be the conversation all week long. They finally figured things out. They played well enough. They got the ground game moving. They got some big plays off against a strong defense. But defensively, how would you say this team played? And do you now have more confidence in the defense than the last couple of weeks? Because the one thing that stood out for me defensively, the Steelers were able to generate a pass rush in this game they haven't had the prior 2 weeks, and that's been the bread and butter for 4+ years, no matter who's there. They're back in business with the pass rush here against Denver.
Yeah, no, I mean, the defense definitely looked better than what it did last week against Green Bay. I think the biggest thing was the fact that they just kept the lid on Denver for the most part. Like last week, they gave up 6 plays north of 20 yards to Green Bay. Anytime you do that, you're likely going to lose. So even without Cam Sutton, they negated small play or the big plays, to a lesser factor this week. So yes, Pierre gave up the long touchdown to Cortland Sutton, but he very much made up for it with the interception. So Yeah, different guys. Henry Mondo had a good play when he got a sack. Devin Bush had another big time sack. So they're being very opportune right now in terms of when they need a big play, they're getting them. So it was extremely promising to see, especially when guys like Alawala were gone for the year. Cam Sutton wasn't there today. Devin Bush left with injury, and Spillane stepped up. So it's nice to see these depth guys come in and make an impact.
And it's really nice to see Bush step up because, of course, he's been injured so much the last year and a half and has not really been able to get going. Although, again, as you mentioned, leaves this game with an injury. So once again, he gets going, has a big game, and then leaves the game with an injury. If he's able to be healthy and be that guy again, certainly will help the defense. And Cam Hayward had another tremendous performance. It's almost become underrated. It's death taxes and Cam Hayward being an impact player for this Steelers defense. Jarrett Bailey, Nick Farabaugh here of Steelers Now on our Steelers postgame show here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. And of course, Steelers Now, our postgame coverage is over there at SteelersNow.com, our postgame recap. We also have some video reaction here over there at Pittsburgh Sports Live. And of course, Steelers Now, I will tell you, maybe not much from the Denver Broncos side, not a chatty bunch over there. We got some one-word answers. They certainly are taking this loss kind of to their heart. This back-to-back for them, and then a rivalry game coming up here. The Steelers, of course, have Seattle Sunday Night Football, and it's going to be Geno Smith, the West Virginia product, starter for the Seahawks. We actually were doing some research before the game. That is the first time that a Mountaineer will start against the Steelers since Geno did it. So that's either for WVU or a West Virginia product starting in the National Football League here, Heinz Field, against the Steelers. But guys, what in this game, despite the victory, because we had to talk positive to open things up. They figured things out offensively. The defense created a pass rush. They got some splash plays off. The offense got lucky to avoid what could have been turnovers and mistakes and interceptions against the Denver defense. If they would have picked off some of those passes, this game could have been totally different. That's all positive for the Steelers. They won the game. It's the NFL getting a win and stopping the bleeding, an absolute big deal. But what still needs to improve for the Steelers? What jumped out at you to say, okay, they won this game, but if this would have changed, if that would have been picked off, if this call was different, if that play was different, they could have easily lost this game. Because to be fair, Teddy Bridgewater almost led the Broncos back to winning this game at the end, which would have been outstanding. And we were also joking in the press box that if Bridgewater would have led Denver to a comeback victory in this game, it would have been so demoralizing. We weren't even sure how we were going to talk to the Steelers the rest of the year. I don't know if they could have got over it no matter who's on the field, but the Steelers did get the victory.
Well, let me tell you this. I think the defense, when Devin Bush is in versus when he's out of the lineup, it's night and day. I think that if he misses multiple weeks with this groin injury, we already know he had a groin injury earlier this year. I hope it's not a re-aggravation of that same injury.
Right.
If he's out multiple weeks, I think they're in trouble defensively. He's such a huge piece of what they do on defense. He really is. I mean, it's just night and day. So Bush leaves the game with the groin, and all of a sudden, there go the Broncos marching.
Right.
He has that type of impact. That's the type of impact he has. I'll also add, I don't think Minkah Fitzpatrick's been good this year. I don't. He struggled. He was better, I think, as the game kind of went on today, but he's got to be better. The best safety on the team this year might be Terrell Edmonds. That's kind of how he's stepped up continually. And Minkah Fitzpatrick has made a few mistakes this year that are like, that's not Minkah Fitzpatrick. That's not what he has done his entire career. I think there's still worry about the defense. The offense, I think the biggest worry about the offense has to be the wide receiver depth at this point. Washington hurt, was out today.
Juju
now Juju's hurt.
Yeah.
So you really only have 4 on the roster.
And reports are, by the way, Juju's being checked out at the hospital, which is much more serious than anybody thought during the game. I don't think anyone thought that was going to be any announcement from Tomlin in the press conference. And for him to be so forthright with that, complete unknown of the future with Juju.
And then you have a soft tissue injury as well with the groin with Washington. Who knows how long that's going to take, whether he'll play next week or not. So then you're actually left with Ray McLeod and Cody White behind Claypool and Deontay Johnson. Yeah. And then, you have Tyler Vaughn's on the practice squad. Rico Bussey's hurt. He was on the practice squad. He's hurt. Yeah. So this receiver room is really injured. They're going to probably have to go out and get someone, I would imagine.
Jarrett, anything you saw from this game that gives you pause, gives you concern still? Obviously, the injuries are going to be a major part of it. That includes Devin Bush. That includes Juju. Deontay's really emerged as a number one, but I guess, as Nick's saying, him being a number one is not really that great if you don't really have a 2, 3, 4, and it's basically Deontay and a 5 out there for the Steelers. That's not going to be enough. It's clearly going to be somebody the Steelers can, or the opponents can key on. What else did you notice in this game that still gives you concern? Because they won it, but it wasn't the prettiest win. They almost lost it at the end. They're leaving this game with a lot of question marks, a lot of concerns, and arguably even more injury-riddled than they were entering the game.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I noticed, Nick touched on Minkah Fitzpatrick's play, the secondary as a whole. I mean, Denver was just able to hit passes on the sideline, like, at will, especially down the stretch on that last drive. Like Kendall Hinton had the reception to set them up inside the 10. And there were multiple receptions where they're just not taking away the sideline. Like down the stretch under a minute left, why would you, like, if anything, you should play sideline in, not sideline out. So there's big plays down the stretch are like the biggest factor for me in this game, but Minkah does have to be better. There hasn't been that game-changing Minkah Fitzpatrick play yet. So I think that those are the two biggest things on the defensive side of the ball. They got the pass rush back today, which is great. Cam Hayward's been awesome. But yeah, I mean, echoing what Nick said, Minkah's got to be better. They need to be able to take away those corner routes better, especially near the sideline. And hopefully they get healthy at receiver. Those are the three biggest things for right now. I mean, the offensive line, we'll see if it can continue to get better. But those would be the three biggest concerns that I have right now.
Yeah, here, Steelers post-game on Pittsburgh Sports Live and Steelers Now. And before we preview that game against Seattle here, Sunday Night Football coming up, another big game for the Steelers, a vulnerable Seahawks team with Geno Smith starting, Russell Wilson now hurt. Nick, can you elaborate a little bit on Minkah Fitzpatrick's struggles this year? Because that has been completely swept under the rug by most media and fans most of this season. The conversation has obviously been about Ben Roethlisberger, the backup QBs, Najee, the offensive line, the list of problems everyone's tweeting and discussing. Minkah hasn't really been on many of those lists I've seen, and people could also point to, and I'm sure the defenders will, that he is a lot more schemed against and keyed on, so it's hard to create those big plays like he was doing 2 years ago. But what have you noticed with him exactly that is leading you to believe he's struggling and right now needing to be a lot better for this team to improve? I don't think I saw, I guess I'll lead you in with this, and I don't know if you agree or not. The only thing I saw is he was more physical in this game. It appeared the Steelers' defense was a lot more physical in this game. You saw a lot more, quote-unquote, remember me shots after plays that were kind of flirting with maybe being a penalty but weren't called. That might be the Steelers' defense waking up a little bit. That's part of the pass rush. But even on the one-on-ones, after a tackle, it's a little harder for Minkah, I saw. Maybe that's frustration. Do you agree with that analysis? And then what else did you see from Minkah that's leading you to still say he's struggling this year? It's not been talked about enough.
Well, here's the thing. You have to put the usage of Minkah this year into context. Prior 2 years, he was just a free safety. This year, he's not just a free safety. He's in the slot. He's in the box. He's still doing his free safety duties. He's kind of doing everything right now, right?
Yeah.
And so here's the thing. Minkah's best as a deep safety, but the Steelers don't trust their corners enough to play single high coverage. They clearly do not trust an older Joe Hayden, James Pierre, even Sutton when he's in there. They do not trust these secondary. They don't trust the secondary to play man-to-man. It's just they're playing cover 2 a lot. They're playing cover 3. They're helping. They're essentially rolling their dice essentially and saying, okay, we're going to give you safety help every play. And the thing is, Minkah's best when he's kind of used as a weapon. He just is like an ad-libber in the middle of the field as a robber or kind of a single over high, and he could do a high-low read and say, okay, I'll take that away. Cornerback, you got that other guy. And, he could do that before because last year they were a really good man-to-man team because they had a few really good man-to-man cover corners. Nelson, Hilton was better in man-to-man, even for his size. But when you look at it now, he's not in that same role. So when he's moving around a lot, he's kind of a little bit out of his comfort zone, but also he's making a lot of mistakes that he usually doesn't make. Obviously, the biggest one that'll be pointed out is the Ruggs touchdown, right? Against Las Vegas. That's the big one. But there's other subtle ones where he doesn't get over in time. He maybe cuts off the wrong route. He leaves a guy open. Some of these opportunities he's leaving out there aren't even being capitalized on. And he's never been a great tackler. So that's also something. You don't need Minka to be a great tackler if he's getting picks and taking away the middle of the field
Sure.
and doing all that, but he's not this year. And that's the thing. He just seems a second too slow. And I think it's because I think they put too much on his plate. But again, I don't think they have the corners to run man-to-man single high coverage. I think they're going to get burnt that way too. So it's going to be probably a year where Minka is going to be a little bit out of his comfort zone.
Yeah, Nick, actually, I can get you to respond to this chatter here. We have some chat action now. And of course, it's about groin injuries. This is a big win and hopefully they're healthy, etc. But we do have a comment here. If he's doing everything, how can you criticize Minka? It sounds as if you're nitpicking a little bit, Nick. Any response to that? Because it is true. He's being asked to do a lot more this year. It's not really his fault that he's being asked to do so much more. And maybe it's not putting him in position to succeed. So is him being less impactful this year 100% his fault?
Yes. The thing is, he's being asked to do more and he's been bad at doing more. It's not that he's been doing a lot well or decently. He's been doing a lot more bad. So that's the thing. You can't nitpick when he's doing his other roles bad. He's not been good in the slot. He's been beat many times in man coverage in the slot. He hasn't tackled well. He hasn't been an efficient blitzer when they've sent him. They've tried to make him all these things, and he's not been good at them. So when you do that, and then when he gets back to his native single high or two high role, he's letting guys go deep over the top or not closing in on the middle of the field quick enough when it's his read inside. That's why you can blame him because, listen, if he was still an elite free safety and an elite robber, we could say, okay, that's Keith Butler. Like, you got to get him. Just let Minka be Minka. And I do think to a degree, they just need to let Minka be Minka.
I think maybe that's what the fan is saying and kind of what I was asking.
I will say,
let him be him.
Thing. Like, yes, you can criticize Butler, but you also have to criticize Minka because he hasn't done the roles he's been asked well to.
Sure.
And that's kind of the thing. So he hasn't done well as a free safety either this year. And that's where I say, okay, I can criticize Minka because he hasn't even done what he did elite last year super well this year, probably because he's just thinking too much because he's doing all these roles.
That's that's the defense, is that he's having to worry about so much more. It just makes sense in any walk of life when you get a job and now you have 17 roles instead of 6. The 6 that you were elite in might also start to suffer a little bit because you're just trying to do so much more and having to scheme and worry about so much more and study more plays and be involved in more team meetings. He has less off time to himself personally during a week. It's a different life that he's leading. And it's really because the Steelers lost players like Mike Hilton, etc. in the offseason to this secondary that it kind of forced some people to be out of roles. So maybe Minka's not in that position to succeed. But of course, it's no excuse to not be as good as he once was, even at what he was great at doing in the past. He's in the NFL. He wants to be a Pro Bowler. He's talked about wanting to be a Hall of Famer. If you're a Hall of Famer, you got to get this done. So certainly no excuses there for Minka. I do want to flip now. The Steelers have this victory. They stopped the bleeding. They beat the Denver Broncos 27-19. They now are crawling to get to 500 potentially. They get a home victory after 2 losses here in Pittsburgh to this point, which is always puzzling for a team in the NFL. It's Seattle. It's a perennial playoff team, but it's a team now without their Hall of Fame quarterback in Russell Wilson. Geno Smith is going to start that game. Certainly has a different dimension to the Seattle Seahawks and certainly makes them vulnerable for the Steelers to kind of get a winning streak going here heading into a bye. Jarrett, what do the Steelers need to do to beat Seattle, and how different is it to be facing a Geno Smith-led Seattle team versus Russell Wilson? Could that actually be a factor that allows the Steelers to get an advantage and get that victory that maybe you wouldn't have thought they would win in the past?
Well, it's definitely a factor. I mean, it's a lot different when you're staring at Geno Smith across the line of scrimmage rather than Russell Wilson.
Sure.
So, and that's no disrespect to Geno Smith. That's just the fact of the matter. But what they can't do is go into this week and be like, all right, Geno Smith, no worries, because we've seen it so many times where the Steelers played down to competition in the past number of years, whether it's against the Mike Glennon-led Bears or the Miami Dolphins, the year the Dolphins were really bad. I think it was back in 2017. Or even the Colts, the year that Andrew Luck was hurt. I believe Brissett was the starter, and then they took him to the limits. Time and time, we've seen the Steelers play down. They can't play down this week. So, at 2-3, the biggest thing for them is, obviously they still got to deal with both DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. That's not going to be easy with a secondary right now. So if their pass rush can consistently get to Geno Smith to help out the secondary that hasn't been good, that'll be great. But right now, a ginormous victory for them would be to win these next two, or to win against Seattle, go 3-3 into the bye, and get ready for Cleveland. So if they can get a sustainable pass rush against Geno Smith, make him uncomfortable, that would be a ginormous win.
Yeah, and Geno Smith looked good actually in mop-up duty when he came in for Russell Wilson after he got hurt just a week ago. So Geno is a capable NFL quarterback. He's certainly not going to be in Canton someday. I don't know if any team would want him to start all year, but he can get you through a game. He started games in the NFL before. He's familiar with this type of offense and certainly has been there now a while. So it's certainly not somebody the Steelers can just say, okay, we got this victory because of Geno Smith and not Russell Wilson. We have seen them lay down for other teams, and that would be the worst case scenario heading into a bye with Cleveland. Then after the bye, after this, when you stop the bleeding and then lose to a backup, that's obviously going to just change the mood right back to where it was prior to this game. Nick, I do want to ask you though, and just play the hypothetical here. We've done this in the past. If the Steelers beat the Seahawks, what do you think occurred? And then if somehow they lose, and they lose to the Seahawks, who are a hungry team, there's still talent there even without Russell Wilson, what then do you think occurred? Sunday Night Football, prime time, the nation's going to be watching. So if the Steelers don't play well, it's going to be a national conversation that they're struggling, which I know they don't like. So they got to impress. This is a way to get those critics off their backside if they can perform as well.
Well, if they win this game, it's essentially what happened today. I think a lot of the same things. I think Geno Smith is even a more limited quarterback than Teddy Bridgewater is, pretty obviously. I think that if you get pressure on Geno Smith, which is very doable, I don't think the Seahawks offensive line is incredible or anything.
Yeah.
They're also probably going to be missing Chris Carson, so they're not going to have their starting running back.
Yeah.
There's a lot there that says, well, the Steelers should have a good defensive game. Now, obviously, they might miss Devin Bush, or they might miss Cam Sutton, and then that might change expectations. But for the Steelers, just play your game. Ben, take care of the football. This is a very weak Seattle secondary. One of the worst they've had in years. They run an archaic type of defense. Their coverages are just – the Legion of Boom was hot 10 years ago, and they haven't changed it since then.
Yeah. Could this be 3 straight weeks, and that'd be the first time for the Steelers – 3 straight weeks of an opening drive touchdown? Because it was the first time in 2017 they had back-to-back weeks with an opening drive touchdown. Maybe they're going to try to catch them again.
Listen, it's possible, man. I mean, listen, they play a lot of cover 3, and if you don't know what cover 3 is, it means they're going to play a lot of off man and sit back. That's the exact type of offense this type of Ben Roethlisberger can eat up. The exact type of defense, and I think Ben, as long as Ben makes the good decisions, he looks sharp, he can do it. He's good against these types of teams. Look at the Titans game from last year, for example, when he kind of diced them up in the first half there. That's kind of the type of a defense you're facing here, and the type of offense you should expect from the Steelers. Obviously, you also want them to run the football well still. Now, if they lose this game, there's a few things that happen. 1, Ben reverts back to whatever he did. 2, the offensive line takes a massive step back. And 3, Geno Smith turns into Russell Wilson, and the defense just lets everything happen and fall apart, right? So there's just going to be, it's essentially, if they lose, everything's just going to take a step back. I think it's just going to be, oh, we thought we were past this, we're actually not. And that's kind of what I think what happened.
Yeah, and there's a lot from the win over Denver to say the Steelers are maybe better than what people were saying the last couple weeks, even though they weren't winning and not playing well. But there's also some from the game, certainly the injuries and even other parts of the game, to say, okay, the Steelers maybe aren't as good as some now are going to be saying, because of course, a couple of these plays could have been picked off by Denver. There could have been 4 turnovers in this game, and there ended up being 0. So that's what Denver was discussing. They felt like they were a play or 2 away from swinging this game the entire other direction. And we will see if the Steelers can keep this up on the ground, through the air, have this be a game they can control. The Steelers were in control against Denver most of the way through. Can they control the game against Seattle? They'll have more time with that late game Sunday night. It will be Geno Smith. It will be a backup running back as well, as Nick alluded to. So this is really a vulnerable Seahawks team. If the Steelers don't get this win, this absolutely will be a game that people will point to at the end of the season if they're a game out of the playoff that people will legitimately say, you lost to Geno Smith and the Seahawks. You should have had that W, and then you can get into the postseason. So there'll be no excuses for this game by any means. Appreciate the time to both of you here. You also can read their stories, their words, their bylines over there at Steelers Now as well. Jarrett Bailey, Nick Farabaugh with me here at Steelers Now. And of course, the Steelers get a 27-19 victory over the Denver Broncos. It's not fixed by any means, but they looked much better than they have the last couple of weeks. I don't think we're going to be discussing benching Ben Roethlisberger this week, which is a big deal for the Steelers, if nothing else. And they need to get healthy in the right places, because a lot of the players that emerged in this game, Devin Bush, Najee Harris, even Juju a little bit early on, Chase Claypool, of course, they emerged and played well in this game. But most of those guys left the game before we had triple zeros with injuries. So if you emerge and then you're missing games, you're not actually helping the team at the end of the day. So the Steelers got to get healthy despite finally having these individuals play better. And of course, the offensive line overall playing better to allow all of it to occur. The Steelers get the victory 27-19. Jarrett Bailey, Nick Farabaugh here of Steelers Now. That'll be it for this edition of the Steelers postgame show here on PSL. Head back over to Steelers Now for all our postgame coverage. Head over to Steelers Now for our coverage throughout the week. Here, Pittsburgh Sports Live for a video reaction. And of course, the Steelers next week, Sunday Night Football. I'll be back here at Heinz Field. Steelers and Seahawks, a Geno Smith-led Seahawks team. So expect some cross-posting as well at West Virginia Sports Now, as we fell backwards into that one as well, as the Steelers now come off a much-needed but a secured victory over Denver.